Hey there, everybody. It's Jeff Tidwell here with another one of my tweet videos for you, this time going all the way back to June 2018. That's over 14 months ago into the past to look at some of my old tweets, break them down, discuss them, so on and so forth. Of course, you can find me at Real Jeff Tidwell on Twitter, Minds, Gab, as well as Parler, Telegram, Instagram, and even some others. If you're not watching this video on YouTube, you're watching it on BitChute. Thank you for watching. Of course, if you do enjoy the content in this video, please do like and subscribe. Hit the little bell below for notifications to get updates whenever I drop a new segment or one of these full-length tweet videos. Of course, please do leave me your thoughts and observations below, your accolades and your criticisms in the comments section. I look forward to speaking with you. And of course, if my cadence is to your liking, a bit on the slow side, you can use the 2x speed button and get all of the information in half the time. Time is the currency after all, so that is double bang for your buck. And of course, that feature is available on BitChute and YouTube as well. I actually use it quite often when watching my own videos, partially because I'm sort of reviewing them on playback, but at times they do actually flow pretty well at double speed. Now, half speed might be a bit more of an ASMR experience. If you can handle it, that option is there as well. So, without further ado, let's get into some of my tweets. And we'll start here with this sentence or two. It's a reference to Raiders of the Lost Ark, starring Harrison Ford. Intersectionality weaponized for political gain. Very dangerous. You go first. So if you've been on Twitter or any of the social media networks, or if you talk politics in 2019, actually I was looking at Edward Snowden. He was saying that he hasn't spoken much on Twitter or social media in 2019 because, well, people are kind of having a bit of a culture war now, aren't they? So intersectionality is a big proponent of that, a component, I should say. Proponent, sure, because intersectionality is, in a sense, it is a form of identity politics, which I also refer to as the modern religion of social justice, and some say cultural Marxism, and some say social Marxism. But intersectionality, intersectional feminism, which would be the fourth wave of the feminist movement. You have the first wave, the second wave, the third wave, and the fourth wave, which is the intersectionality, and that includes, of course, the LGBTQ movement as well. But when you're weaponizing otherism, when you're weaponizing putting people into groups instead of viewing them as individuals, well, you might have a bad time. In this pursuit, this altruistic pursuit of togetherness, of equality and equity, well, there's a few different ways of going about that. You can adjust your economy, you can look at all the social issues and ask questions and survey people, or you can just look at people and go, well, you're this minority, so if you're not the majority, you're a minority. Majority being the oppressor, minority being the oppressed, in any given setting. Doesn't matter if it's about immutable characteristics, or religion, or your job, your occupation, or your hobbies, how you associate. Hell, even the people you talk to, people come after you, intersectionalists, and look at you more as the group you're a part of as opposed to the individual. Now, I learned this, of course, in 2016, when in Massachusetts we had a pretty blue state. Now, I had a couple friends that immediately brought race and sex into the conversation when we were discussing how we voted. So I said, well, I was just like their comrade Kyle Kulinski, and I said, I'm going to go ahead and vote for Jill Stein, the Green Party candidate, and because I can't really stomach voting for Hillary Clinton. And I said, well, just like Kyle Kulinski of Secular Talk, check him out on YouTube, I said, if I lived in a swing state, I would vote for the Democrat, because at the time I did not want President Trump, the then nominee, the Republican nominee Trump. I did not want him to win. In fact, I was quite anti-Trump at that time. I've kind of changed my tune over the past 3 years. Hillary Clinton is not the only person that's allowed to evolve, after all. So I said I'll vote for the Green Party candidate. That goes more with my personal principles, my personal feelings about politics, about policy. And hey, it's a woman as well. I'll be voting for a female candidate for the first time, by the way, since I was a 2 times Obama voter. And they said, you privileged white male, you know, I honestly can't explain why they went to that. I mean, they were a bit traumatized. Of course, this is just after Trump won on November 8th. The aftermath on November 9th, 2016, Trump had won. And immediately I had a couple friends say, you're privileged, you're white, you're male. And I said, you know, this is why Trump won. Because you keep framing everything as these immutable characteristics. I can't do anything about this. I can't feel guilty about this. If I felt guilty about who I am, who I was born as, well, I mean, it's a struggle that people do. People do have guilt complexes, and they can feel like they're, you know, imposter syndrome. There's all these different ways that people can feel like they don't belong. But me, I said, you know, I'm just going with my instinct here. And if I would have voted for Hillary Clinton. But because the Democrat Party had created such a dynamic that if you didn't vote for Hillary, you were voting for Trump. If you didn't go with the Democrats, you were any other option, Trump. Now, I'm not sure if that was, you know, electorally true. If there were a couple states that were pretty close, where Jill Stein or Gary Johnson or any of the other, you know, independent candidates, Vermin Supreme, they were there. But, you know, and frankly, you're supposed to earn our vote. You're supposed to earn our vote. You're not supposed to be just given our vote without consideration. Oh, you're on the red team, so I'm going to vote for you. That's not how it's supposed to work. You're supposed to actually earn the vote and not reward people, presidential candidates, congressional candidates, for doing a bad job. If they did a bad job persuading you or explaining themselves, or if they have positions you don't believe in or agree with, well, how can you stomach voting for them? You know, this is why people don't vote at all. The energy just isn't there. They're like, I can't get behind this. Now, there were plenty of people that, you know, wanted to vote Clinton or Trump that stayed home. So how much, when you're saying like, oh, you know, because, you know, the Green Party and the Libertarian Party exist, it takes away votes from the other parties. I say, well, how many people stayed home? Leave me a comment below with how many people stayed home, eligible voters, in the 2016 U.S. presidential election, because it's a large number. It's probably over half the people that were eligible didn't vote. So how much at fault, if you're going to be traumatized and placing blame wherever you'd like to, how much do they factor in? But you see them around, the disciples of the modern religion of social justice, and they're, you know, altruistic racists, altruistic otherists, because, you know, despite their best intentions, wherever those may lead, well, they separate people by group, you know, just like Richard Nixon, just like the Southern strategy back in the 1960s. And they'll say, well, we're looking out for the little guy. We're looking out for minorities. We're looking out for the disadvantaged. And that's all very, you know, virtuous. I support the goal there. But the method, the system that they're using to get there, identity politics, it's not really very humanistic to me. I think that it's, you know, it's collectivism. It's not individuality. It's not the liberty, the individual liberty and agency that we, you know, our country, the United States, was founded upon. The states are separate. They have their own sovereignty. They have their own laws, and they all fall under that big umbrella that is the federal government. But in the end, they're all their own thing. I don't wish to be defined by the color of my skin or my ethnicity, my national origin. I was born here in the United States, but going back in terms of where people of my culture came from originally, where they, immigrated from or migrated from, I don't want to be defined by those people. I have nothing to do with those people except for we have the same amount of, I believe is it melanin? It's like the stuff that makes your skin the pigment color that it is. And I'm male. There was pretty much two major options there for Mother Nature, and I became male. So, I know plenty of women that share my disposition about things, that share my positions. I could have very easily been a woman, and I could have had the same positions. I could have had the same politics, the same philosophy. There's 7 billion philosophies out there, but I could have had any one of those, but I happen to have this one. And of course, so I'm biased. I have in-group preference. I have all these reasons why, my view is skewed, of course. And someone could say, well, you have money, however much they think I have. Or they could say, you have this, you're in this group. You have these immutable characteristics. You're in this part of the world. You're in this part of the country. They could say you have privilege. And I say, look, if you want to break it down by privilege and by group, hey, be my guest. I'm no judge. I am no prophet of any modern religion. These are for the devoutly secular to find individual, their individual truth. No, I was going to say it's how they find their universal truth, not their individual truth, not their subjective inner world, but their outer world truth. When you don't have God, you have to replace Him. Or if you don't have Allah, you have to replace Him with something, even if you're secular. And what they do is they replace them with modern religion. And that's social justice, how to organize society and what is most important, what are the biggest goals. And I think that, in the search for real world moralism and making sure everyone's okay, it's just like Benjamin Franklin said about, sacrificing security. It doesn't jive for everybody. And so it is a philosophy. It's an ideology, and reality and ideology, they run on separate interweaving tracks. My view of the world isn't your view of the world. Your view of the world isn't my view of the world. And so people are willing to trade a lot of their freedom for more safety, more security. So they're willing to go down this rabbit hole of the modern religion that is censorship to make sure that any ideas that conflict with their ideology of social justice, they don't get the airtime that they normally would have. They artificially limit which conversations are being had. And of course, they limit speech, they limit the words, they try to condition everybody and get everybody on the same page. But at the end of the day, you have to be compliant to this very specific ideology. Now, I consider myself a bit agnostic on social justice as a modern religion, but I do consider myself to be, at the least, a second wave feminist that has, some appreciation for a few things in the third and fourth wave. But the third wave feminism, to me, was the start of, things were generally equal. And then, when you're on a crusade, it's hard to know when the war is over. And in many ways, the war is never over. The struggle always continues somehow, some way, with some person that hasn't been persuaded, that hasn't been brought in on the progress that the rest of us have enjoyed. But with third and fourth wave feminism, there are elements we need to respect. The LGBTQAI plus community, they, have made major strides in the United States. Gay marriage became legal, and there's been some strides in acceptance. But of course, villainizing, demonizing, creating an other, creating an oppressor to, redirect our hate, because there's nothing people love to do more than hate, and it's about directing it correctly. Well, they direct it towards the oppressor, and the oppressor is, however, they're arbitrarily assigned by the prophets of the modern religion of social justice. So intersectionality weaponized for political gain, very dangerous. You go first. Why is it dangerous? Well, it is generating racism, it is generating otherism, generating sexism, pitting two different sides against each other, putting them against one another. And we've seen the intersectional movement break down a little bit, because you have different groups of feminists now that are ideologically fighting it out. That was the tell for me. That was the proof where I said, we keep on going down that road, that beautiful yellow brick road, to somewhere that these good intentions take us. And, are you bringing more love into the world? Or are you bringing more division? Are you pulling people apart? Or are you bringing them together? And then you have to look at this in a universal context. If you're looking for universal truth and moral virtue, it can't just apply to places that are... You can't just go into a majority black country and say, well, where are all the white and Asian people? Why are you being so oppressive? They have to be in equal numbers, and they have to have an equal opportunity, and so on and so forth, which is something we should have. We should have equal opportunity for all people, regardless of their race, creed, any of these things, sex, gender, religion. We should, but it's not a game. Life isn't a game to make everything leveled off and equal. We should offer equal opportunity, but it's really hard. Trying to get equal outcomes is really, really hard in a meritocratic system. Either you get rid of meritocracy, and then maybe you could have more equal outcomes. But intersectionality is well intended. There are good parts of it. But again, when it gets weaponized, people use it. They run around. I saw a guy on Twitter the other day who's like, well, you know what racists don't like? Racists don't like being called racist. And then another person of color came in. And that was a white guy saying that. So, that's the oppressor, right? According to the modern religion. Person of color comes in, or, a darker hue. Okay, not a white color, but a darker color. They come in and they're like, do you like being called a racist? Like, who likes being called a racist? I don't care. I don't mind being called a racist. I've been called all sorts of things in my time on social media and so forth. Call me racist if you want. Call me a sexist, misogynist pig. Call me dumb. Call me stupid. Say I'm wrong. It's just, it has to flow off of you. If it doesn't flow off of you when people say things about you that aren't true, if you just take everything to heart, every insult, every commentary that's half-baked, as Scott Adams says, a half-pinion about you, they don't really know what you're doing. They're just trying to mind read. They're trying to project. They're trying to straw man. If you take all those so seriously, you're not going to have much fun online, because this is a constant cycle, constant struggle. Name calling. It's just like the old schoolyard. I don't like to bring race into the discussion unless it is, warranted. If it's contextual. I don't like to bring it up in terms of talking about the socioeconomic picture. I mean, there are certain races that are disproportionately in the lower income brackets, and there are others that are in the higher income brackets. So there is this class, this Marxist look, saying classes are divided. You have the rich, you have the poor. So identity politics, people will say, like, all politics are identity politics. All politics are identity politics. And I say, well, in some respect, like, you have people that are patriotic, so you appeal to their American group. sensibility, their group mentality as a nation. You know, if you're a nationalistic president, you want to say, you know, France first, Canada first, America first. Yeah, you want to appeal to the national identity of your voters. You want to look at them by the country they, you know, come from, and they're proud to be, you know, American, proud to be French or Canadian, or French Canadian even. But in terms of, I think it's doing more harm. I don't want to call it immoral per se. But I think it's doing more harm than good at this point to keep bringing up race, to keep bringing up gender and sex. Bring it up. But to point to a situation and say, oh, well, you did this bad thing, you did this negative thing, or this positive thing. You did it because of an immutable characteristic. In the long run, does that help or does that hurt? Should we be defined by our immutable characteristics? I don't know. I don't think so, but you can leave me a comment below with your thoughts and observations on that. A lot of beeps outside today. I mean, it's all about framing in the end. I see this other tweet here saying, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban, it's not a Muslim ban. Because of the 7 countries that the Trump administration had banned from travel to the United States. I guess they were predominantly Muslim, but of course using identity politics. This is why I kind of, I used to pitch to some degree identity politics. But I very quickly fell off when I learned that any situation can be framed as identity. Like these countries don't have just Muslim people, and lots of Muslim countries weren't banned, and yet they're framing it as a Muslim ban. It's a political ploy. It's a post-truth ploy. You just frame it up, say it's Muslim ban. That isn't explicitly what it is. But again, it's like saying that any bill that benefits the rich is racist, because certain races are associated more with the lower income groups. No. That's a separation. That's a different level altogether from what you're saying. And that really puts people in a box, too. That removes their individuality. Like, look at all the people in that group, for example, that you're alluding to or referring to as being, marginalized or disadvantaged. What about the people that are in that group that are in the upper group? How do they feel? How do the people below feel that, for example, black people are associated with lower income? Even if it's true, is it something that motivates people? Or is it something that, disrespects them, dishonors them? Does it feel good to be associated with a negative thing? And, it could be something to look at in order to improve the situation. You could look at it and go, well, we could do more, we could do better. This is a marker, this is an indicator where resources are needed. But again, framing everything as race, as gender, as our group, the groups we're a part of, it can be, I think there are diminishing returns. And I think we're starting to see them because, people don't even want to talk online that much anymore in 2019. 2019 has been the year of hoaxes and all kinds of nonsense. People at each other's throats. You have groups saying that they're, Antifa, anti-fascist. And then Scott Adams came up with one called Antira, anti-racist, because basically Antifa was saying that any group that that goes against them is by definition fascist because they're anti-fascist. Like they're operating on like the most basic linguistic plane. They're saying like just because we put a label on it, it means the reality shifts based on the label. Everything's a construct. You can just label. It's postmodernism. You can label whatever you want. Change the label. Change the game entirely. And I say, no. Some things in this world are concrete. You know, you can't just change the word and change the meaning entirely. You know, especially when it's talking about people. People are ever changing. You know, people are very unique. Like I was saying here, politics are a world of post-truth. Take every word a politician says literally, and you're going to have a bad time. So, yeah. In this world, we have lots of people that take politics super duper seriously. You know, as soon as President Trump came out and said, well, I want to build a wall, they came up in their head with this giant concrete slab, this medieval wall, you know, like the imagery. We let our imaginations take hold. You know, and in politics, you know, there might be policy, right? But a lot of the rhetoric is like pie in the sky, like use your imagination kind of stuff. You know, like a lot of it's directionally accurate. Like, you know, in general, where, you know, a presidential candidate or a gubernatorial candidate is going. But overall, a lot of what they say doesn't end up being actually, you know, fact-checkably true. Or it's inexact. It's not accurate. And that's post-truth. You know, they say what they need to say to get elected, and then once they're there, they use, you know, weasel words, and they use linguistic filters, and they use all these different things, propaganda, of course, to direct us around. And it doesn't need to conform to hard reality. It can go with our, you know, it can be feelings over facts. You know, Scott Adams talks about this a little bit. Of course, Real Coffee with Scott Adams on YouTube. He talks about this a bit, that we don't make decisions based on facts. We make them based on feelings, emotion. And the facts don't persuade. You can give people as many graphs or scientific articles as you want, but that doesn't tend to get them. It's more of an emotional connection. It's more of pacing them and helping them to understand from their existing perspective. You know, mirroring and so on and so forth. All the persuasion techniques. But these politicians, they don't tell the truth. You know, somebody said something about like a politician. I want to find a politician that tells the truth. And you know, you have Bernie Sanders. You have a couple of different folks out there that are relatively truth tellers. You know, it seems they believe what they're saying, but it doesn't mean that it's realistic. It doesn't mean that it's pragmatic. I don't know. I really don't know. I was a Bernie Sanders supporter. And let me tell you, people kept on saying, Jeff, he's pie in the sky. He doesn't know what he's talking about. He doesn't understand math. He doesn't understand economics. And I said, no. I'm emotionally attached to Bernie Sanders because I spent my entire 20s on the hard left. I was on the hard left. And Bernie Sanders said all the right things for me. And for Kyle Kulinski. So Kyle and I, well, if we live in a hard blue state, we went ahead and voted for, I think Kyle voted for Jill Stein. I know I did. When Bernie Sanders was cheated by the DNC and Debbie Wasserman Schultz, and of course Donna Brazile giving the questions to Hillary Clinton at CNN, the debate. So, you know, I understand that, you know, Bernie Sanders at the time was saying a lot of great things. But again, post-truth world, big asks. Big asks. Donald Trump did the same thing. It's not any one side. It's both sides, of course. Always both sides. Everything we say here, it applies to both sides. Usually one or another more at different times. You know, identity politics, I'd say that at this moment in time, the Democrats are the party of identity politics. But in the terms of a post-truth realm politics, I do have a video. Politics is a post-truth realm where I talk about more of this. There are no politicians that can tell you the absolute truth because I don't think that the public can take the real truth about the world. You know, being president, being in charge of wars, of making decisions that affect thousands, if not millions of lives, almost every single day. I mean, there's a lot that I think that if people knew, the morale of countries would drop. You know, I do believe that the people deserve to know. I believe in transparency. I believe in WikiLeaks. I believe in whistleblowers. I believe in Edward Snowden, Chelsea Manning, Julian Assange, Project Veritas, all those great new Google leaks from the behind the scenes of Google's social engineering and censorship. Excuse me. But in the end, I mean, I understand why the politicians have to, you know, they're also negotiating things. They don't want to present themselves the wrong way to other world leaders, to other factions. So there's so many reasons why politicians lie. And if you take every word a politician says literally, well, you're going to have a bad time. And if you take all the fear-mongering, all the scare words, and all the things that politicians say so that you'll elect them and not the other person over there. You'll elect them and not the other person. Those things are the things you can ignore the most, because both sides are saying things that are ridiculous. You know, I don't want to try to mind read Ilhan Omar. I don't want to mind read Ilhan Omar or Rashida Tlaib or any of these people, but they say, oh, they hate Jews, they hate Israel. I mean, that's President Trump fear-mongering. And of course, the people running around saying, Orange Man Hitler, Orange Man bad, Hitler. Okay, it's okay to be a dissenting voice about President Trump or anybody. But of course, the hysteria, the mass hysteria of Trump derangement syndrome, well, these people, they'll say almost anything is a warning sign for them. Almost anything. He says this the wrong way, if he uses the wrong word, all of a sudden we're headed for World War III. We're headed for Communist China or Soviet Russia. We're headed for some form of dystopia because the president tweeted something that you didn't like. It's all wild. People just take things way, way too literal. I say literalism is eating away at the fabric of our society. I really do. But it's tough, you know. Sometimes it's important to take a fact-based approach and point at every little, you know, go into semantics and pedantics and point at everything that makes the argument logical and solid and scientific. And then other times it's like, well, there's hyperbole here, hyperbole there. Politics is a post-truth realm because it is full of hyperbole. It's full of false promises. And frankly, taking it too seriously is how people are tearing apart their friendships. They're tearing apart their relationships. And they're giving themselves a form of depression because they don't see any light at the end of the tunnel. I do think that President Trump is likely to win 2020. And I think that people need to get used to that. They need to understand that it's a likelihood. It's a possibility, and it's a likelihood. And it's best, like I say, with my cognitive dissonance workout routine, another video, check it out on my channel, both on BitChute and on YouTube. But you have to get, if you use the cognitive dissonance workout routine, you can get, you know, your cognitive dissonance muscles worked out. You can get used to it. I like to prime myself before I have to deal with something that could be troublesome. So, say, for example, I said, well, President Trump, fight him all you will. Maybe he'll lose. Maybe he'll win. I think he'll win. Fight him if you want. But understand that there is a decent likelihood of him winning. So you don't want to be caught in this mindset where you're like, he has to lose, he has to lose, he has to lose. If he doesn't lose, I don't have an out. You need to get used to that possibility. Because I don't want to see any more pain. I want to see things get better after the election. I want to see people come back together. They were pulled apart by identity politics. And I want to see them pulled back together. And I want them to talk. I want us to be able to associate with each other. I want us to be able to laugh with each other. And right now, 2019, we're in the throes of the political season, and people are just not as friendly. They're combative. They think everybody is out to get them. They don't understand if it's either the right or the left. It doesn't matter. Whatever. That's a false dichotomy. Whatever it might be. Anywhere in the political sphere, people are bringing politics into everything, and they're, not your average person. Like, I really don't think it's your average person. I think it's more about the internet culture, where they just need to make sure, like, well, before I talk to you, before I read this article, before I watch this show, what are the political beliefs? What's going on in the head? Regardless of what people state, what's going on in their head? It's just this constant state of like, are they lying? She said she was a Democrat. Can I trust her? I mean, we're getting to this point where no one is trusting each other. People are starting to really believe, not too many people, but those that are part of the mass hysteria of, say, for example, Trump derangement syndrome, they are in this mindset where, and I'm going off of their words. I'm not trying to mind read here. I'm not trying to project. I'm going off of what I see, what I'm observing, and giving my analysis of what I am taking in for information. It does seem like a number of people in the past 3 years, people that they trusted before, that they knew, that had right think, that were good people, they're now seen as the enemy, the other. You voted Republican? How could you do that? Are you a racist? Are you, like all these terms, they lost all meaning. But it doesn't mean that people didn't get pulled apart when one person got called a sexist here. One person got called a pedophile or whatever it might be there. That's a pretty harsh one, actually. If you go and call somebody, hey, that's a good pro tip. Call somebody a pedophile and see how that works out. You might get hit with defamation or libel or slander. But yeah, don't take politics too seriously, okay? It is important, the policy, the future of the country, the future of your municipal area, the future of your state, the future of the country is in our hands. It's important that we vote, that we do our civic duty and vote. Of course, make this representative democracy work. But I think that all the fear has to go somewhere. All the hatred that bubbles up when a politician uses identity politics or says a bunch of really outlandish rhetoric, and if you're a President Trump fan, you know what I'm talking about. Everybody that gets riled up, all of the disciples of outrage culture, a modern religion, they get riled up, that has to go somewhere. It doesn't just dissipate. The catharsis comes from somewhere. And it's coming from going after other people, taking their guilt and their feelings, pointing to other people and saying, well, what could you have done about this? I tried my hardest. You just leaned into the shot. You leaned into the ball and got hit in the head. Because the politician I didn't want didn't get in. And it is tearing us apart. I was going to talk about how my mother, this is another little point about Trump derangement syndrome. So it's interesting now that we have this president that people think is evil or dumb or incompetent or traitor or treasonous. He's Putin's puppet, whatever it might be. Russia, whatever they might say. Well, this isn't my first go-round. This isn't my first rodeo with derangement syndrome, because in 1993, I was 9 years old, and my first association with the word Antichrist was Bill Clinton. Yeah, my mother, not so much my father, my mother would go around telling us kids that Revelation had come true. 666, the mark of the beast. And Bill Clinton was in the New Testament. he is the one that we need to watch for. 2,000 years, like this is leading up to the millennium, the year 2000, Y2K. And she was putting all this negative, demonic, satanic imagery associated with Bill Clinton in my head. My first association with Bill Clinton wasn't the saxophone or the dog or any of the, it was the cat, Socks the cat, I don't remember. But it was this really harsh, negative stuff that is like ridiculous. It's irrational. It's emotional. This really vivid view of President Clinton as the Antichrist. And of course, when Bush went in, my parents were more Republican. When Bush went in, well, they didn't care so much. In fact, they were, remoralized. They were brought together. They weren't demoralized, they were remoralized. Brought together over 9/11. And so they supported getting, Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden and so forth. So they were brought together by that. So I didn't really know Bush derangement syndrome, but oh, did I know Obama derangement syndrome. As a two-time Obama voter, of course, hearing about Kenya. And, again, it's okay to critique President Obama on his merits and his flaws, what his decisions were, what happened, like blowing up Libya, bad idea. A couple other things he did, whatever you want to highlight, bad idea. Improving our relationship with Cuba, good idea. We have to bring everybody back to the table. And President Obama brought our economy back from the brink. So there's plenty to say about President Obama that's positive, but of course, with the Obama derangement syndrome, you had lots of people that were saying things that were just outlandish. That he was some kind of figure sent from hell itself to, to reap the souls of the wicked and the not so wicked, just American people. Socialist, they call him a socialist. Whatever it might be. There might have been some, again, I think that, capitalism and socialism are kind of a bit of a spectrum at times. You take those two sides, and there were things that President Obama did that were, capitalistic, socialistic. So you can say, well, he's a socialist on Tuesday and he's a capitalist on Wednesday, because that's kind of the way it was. When you're this neoliberal Democrat and you're dealing with the Republicans, you're dealing with America. We have a pretty set system with all the lobbyists and so on and so forth. But no, he wasn't the devil. He wasn't some Manchurian candidate. No, you can come up with your conspiracy theories. And again, I'm using this term lovingly. If you're a conspiracy analyst, look at a conspiracy theory about Obama and look for the truth. Look at both sides, look at all sides, and look for things that have, look for the empirical evidence, look for the facts, look for the truth in these accusations, in these things. Is there any truth? I believe that President Obama was born in Hawaii. But if any evidence, again, evidence, use your reason, use your rationality, not your rationalizing, your rationality. And if you get new evidence that says one thing or another, yeah, of course I'd update my viewpoint on it. But people were just losing their mind. The pendulum had swung, and it swings back and forth, and as it's swinging, anybody that isn't in power appears and acts more crazy. So the Republicans were acting crazy when Obama was president, and thus, well, you know what I'm going to say. Just what I'm going to say. So yeah, she was putting the image of Clinton as the devil in my head. Not Hitler, but close. So more tweets, onward and upward. So I have a tweet here that should get the Star Wars fans quite interested, or at least perk their ears up. Here's a tweet captioned on being a Jedi. Thought, action, words, acting on words, imagination, reality. Jedis know minds can be led, but they cannot be read. And a lightsaber has no agency of its own. So what I'm talking about here is, and I do see this. I've heard about this. Someone used the term pogrom. Now, a pogrom, I'm going to loosely define it here because I haven't looked at the definition in a few days. But they were talking about how, somebody can say something and then activate a group that will then massacre another group based on the dog whistle or whatever it might be. It's a pogrom. It's kind of a pretentious way of saying, no, people don't have agency. They just follow the leader. They follow the Pied Piper. But Jedis don't do that. Jedis separate thought from action. They separate words from acting on words. Words, they have meaning. But they're just words. They're not actually hitting something, hurting something, harming something. Except for feelings. For the most part, just feelings are hurt by words. Imagination and reality. What's happening in somebody's head versus what they're doing in the malleable world are two separate things. Jedis know that. They live in the metaphysical realm, the Force. They need to know the difference between words and acting on words. Otherwise, who knows what the hell they would do with their Force magic, their Force powers. If you played Knights of the Old Republic, you know what I'm talking about. So Jedis know the minds can be led, but they cannot be read. So, yes, we can be easily conditioned, easily led around. Our pattern recognition gets programmed by our environment, by the media, by the internet, by other people, by ourselves. We get hypnotized, we get brainwashed. Every minute of every day by somebody or something. We get conditioned and programmed to act in a certain way. So, minds can be led by like a Pied Piper. A person with power, person of import says something. It can be very persuasive. It can be very, it can really pull you in. It can make you want to act. It can give you that Kairos effect. Act, agency. Go for it. But minds cannot be read. Mind reading is impossible. Okay, no matter what we do, we can forfeit our personal agency and act like a drone or a sheep and go around. But at the end of the day, they don't really know what's going on quite inside our head. Until Neuralink comes out, until Elon Musk drops the Neuralink. But of course, I finally say here, very tongue-in-cheek, a lightsaber has no agency of its own. What this means is that it's not the gun that shoots, it's not the gun that pulls the trigger, I should say, but the person. And you have to be in the right space mentally to pull the trigger. And we had the Gilroy, the El Paso, Dayton, Ohio shootings recently. We have shootings virtually every single day in places like Chicago and Baltimore and across the country. And there are so many factors that go in, but limiting guns, pulling back personal protection, it's really, gun crime is a symptom of the problems we're seeing. It's not the problem itself. A lot of gun crime, and it's not really reported very often, but if you look at the FBI crime stats, see that suicide accounts for a lot of gun crime. Gang-related violence. It's not usually a lone wolf. We have to think about the mental health that's, what's going on in these people's heads. Are they depressed? Are they despondent? Do they have anything to live for? Like, we have problems. We have issues to work out. But removing people's personal protection, undermining the Second Amendment to get there, I don't think that's the wisest way to go. You know, once a law is put in, it's hard to pull it back. It's just the way it is, you know. The slippery slope can, to some degree, exist. I know that that can be, you know, oftentimes a fallacy. But with guns, yeah, once you're disarmed, you're not getting your arms back. And it's part of why we're so safe as a country is because we're armed. Then, of course, people will point to the statistics and say that, like, oh, you know, in Australia or Japan, there isn't as much gun crime. There hasn't been any gun death since this year or that year. And I'm like, well, those countries are not the United States of America. We have our own culture. We have our own constitution. You know, analogies are bad for this reason. They're good for explaining a concept, but not good for winning people over. Like Scott Adams says, you know, analogies are bad. Analogies, they can be fun, but they're not looking at the full picture. We have a country, we have our urban areas, we have our rural areas, and we have 250 years of history that show, you know, these problems, they have ebbs and flows. They run in cycles. You know, things were much, much worse in the 80s and 90s when it came to gun crime. And actions were taken. There was an assault weapons ban for a little while. It ran out. And, yeah, you can make your best effort to say, like, which legislation would help us make this a safer country. But at the end of the day, the gun crime is just, the gun is just a tool that if they don't use that tool, if they don't use that gun, if you make that gun illegal, if you take it off the lawful market and make it black market only, they're just going to get it some other way. Or they're just going to kill some other way. You know? Because oftentimes these killers that shoot, the ones that we're really worried about, the mass shooters, many times they are angling for suicide. Yeah. In fact, they go into these situations where there's almost no chance of them getting out alive. They're doing it for whatever reason they might have. Maybe they want some publicity. Maybe they want to be important. They want to make a statement. Maybe they want to inspire copycats, have copycat contagion, which is another tweet of mine. I'll be doing a video on that sometime in the future. But, you know, create a movement by slaughtering a bunch of people. See, it's not really, they're not very well in the head. That's the idea. When they say, like, I had arguments with people on Twitter, they say, mental health is a cop-out. I'm like, well, yeah. So a sane person picks up a gun and shoots people with it for no reason. A sane person does that. That's the framing we're talking about here. Okay? I wouldn't say that a mentally well person is running around shooting people. So clearly there's a problem. Clearly they don't have enough love in their life. They don't have the support they need. Maybe they've been conditioned a certain way. Maybe it's not even their fault. Shooting the gun's their fault. Pulling the trigger's their fault. But, you know, did they come into this world? Were they born as a child and destined to commit these heinous, evil acts? No. They were conditioned that way. They were brought up that way. They were almost forced into it. Now, again, there's no way you can rationalize mass violence, any violence. Domestic violence is evil. But, you know, these monsters are created. We should try to work on getting to the solution to that problem. And not just focusing on, well, what's the easiest solution? Get rid of the guns! There was a car accident. Get rid of the cars! There's an analogy. Bad analogy. Cars are not guns. But a lightsaber has no agency of its own. It requires a Jedi to wield it. Or a Sith. I think the Siths would be the ones that would be more likely to commit the acts of terror and the genocidal acts. Just like Anakin Skywalker in Revenge of the Sith. When he took out that young school of Padawans. That was pretty awful. More of that scene than the movie itself. The movie itself was probably, of the first 3 episodes, you had The Phantom Menace, Attack of the Clones, and then Revenge of the Sith, episodes 1 through 3 of Star Wars. I would say that the third one was the best, but it was a tough, it was a tough trilogy to rate. Second one was the worst, I'll say that. Attack of the Clones, it had the Yoda fight with was it Count Dooku? Christopher Lee. Yeah, it was fun. But no, I actually preferred, I think of the newer ones, of all the later ones after Return of the Jedi, I think I prefer the most The Force Awakens. Might be a controversial opinion, but leave me a comment below what you think about that. It was a fun reboot of the first movie, A New Hope. So, whatever. So speaking of mental health, I have a tweet here that touches on, once again, about the politics, about not taking it too seriously, not taking it, and ruining your family life because of it. Accepting the inevitable is part of achieving better mental health. Hillary Clinton supports the oil industry. Donald Trump supports the oil industry. It was inevitable. Oil is here to stay. For now. So let's continue work on technology to counter its negative effects. For example, CO2. So, one thing I remember from back in 2015 and 2016, as a Bernie Sanders supporter, I remember being mad at Hillary Clinton because she was fracking, which is this hydraulic process of getting some of the crude oil out. Again, you can look up fracking, seek subject matter experts, but it's a process for getting oil out of the ground, I believe using water. And some people say that it can cause all kinds of problems, but at the same time it's also one of the cleaner, more efficient ways of getting fossil fuels. So, I was a purist. I have a tweet coming up about purism that I'll be posting at some point soon. But I was a purist. I said, we might as well go for the whole thing. We want to solve climate change. We want to reformat our energy system. We want to do all this stuff that's going to help us in the long run. Like when I'm an old man, I want to look back and go, I made the right choice. I voted for the right people to do the right things. I want our economy to work. I want our energy to work. I want us to have jobs. Sanders has all that, and he says no fracking. We're against the Dakota Access Pipeline. We're against the Keystone XL Pipeline. And Bernie Sanders was cheated. Bernie Sanders was never going to be president. As much energy as there was for Bernie among even the mainstream Democrats. They liked him a lot. But they didn't see him as electable, partially because of how he calls himself a democratic socialist, so on and so forth. He's very old, and he's even older now in 2019 and 2020. Even older than Joe Biden, who, well, the less said about Joe Biden, the better. But if you wanted to hear more about Joe Biden, check out my video, Identity Politics Bingo, featuring Joe Biden, where I talk about the impact of identity politics on the electability of former Vice President Joe Biden. That's fun. So Hillary supported the oil industry. Donald Trump supports the oil industry. It was inevitable that oil is here to stay. So, no matter what, no matter who got to the finish line, we were going to have more fossil fuels. We were going to have more of coal, whatever it is. We're looking towards the future to renewables, wind, solar. I support nuclear energy, Generation 3 and Generation 4 nuclear. Shout out to Mark Schneider on Twitter. Check him out, Schneider. Talking about Generation 4 nuclear, which is it's still in development, but you have nuclear power now that does not melt down and uses nuclear waste for fuel with pretty high yields, around 80 to 90%, according to some estimates. So I do support the advancement of green energy, and I consider myself to some degree to be an environmentalist, even though I don't always subscribe to the modern religion that is global warming. But it seems inevitable that the world economy, you don't want it to come crashing down. If you remove fossil fuels right now without a replacement immediately that's cost effective and efficient and is easy for third world countries to get and easy for all the countries to transfer to, if you can't put nuclear in right away, if you can't put solar in and have it be, have it yield well, yeah, you're going to need fossil fuels. You're going to need natural gas. And some people say you need coal. Coal is very dirty. I hope we can phase it out. But until it's phased out, I like to say, just go with it. And that's kind of what I'm saying here when I talk about the politics of it. If you were dead set against global warming or climate change, and then you saw Hillary Clinton, and she was supporting fossil fuels as well, and Donald Trump even more so, that's depressing. If you hang your hat on that, I actually have a video out, the relationship effects of climate change and how, talk of these really important issues, these really divisive issues, can split people apart, even lovers, friends, whoever it might be. Politics can tear us limb from limb, tear us apart. So I say casual fatalism. Accepting the inevitable is part of achieving better mental health. If you can't escape it, you've got to learn to live with it. So I say let's work on technology to counter its negative effects. So we have carbon capture, we have nuclear, renewables. I went through the list a little bit just now. So hopefully we can find a solution that benefits all countries to the greatest degree possible. So talking more about presidential politics. President Obama said that countrywide change is glacial. However, as technology advances, the information age rolls on, presenting new challenges, new opportunities. Old struggles struggle to adapt to accelerated innovation. Old structures struggle to adapt to accelerated innovation. Old strategies cease to work. Think differently. Is that the Apple slogan? Or is it think different? Think differently doesn't sound as clean. It's too many syllables. So President Obama said that countrywide change is glacial. Yeah, you can't just upend the system and put in a new one. You can't just get rid of capitalism one day, bring in socialism like that. There's a lot of people that have already paid a lot of taxes, that have already gone through a process, and they have to be here too. They have a voice. You can't just say, well, we know best. Push in, change things up. There has to be a rollout period. Usually laws roll out, changes, even like minimum wage takes 5 to 10 years sometimes for these changes to go, So we also, though, at this point in time, we have computers. We have the technology age, the information age, where technology advances and presents new challenges, new opportunities. So old structures struggle to adapt to accelerated innovation. So there are systems that are running right now that have trouble keeping up with the ever-changing world. And, of course, with all the communication we have through the World Wide Web, the internet, the interweb, people are getting better at solving problems. They're getting better at fixing what ain't quite right. Those old structures are buckling. With a new innovation, we need new things quicker. Things are speeding up. Old strategies cease to work. So I say think differently. Don't live in the past. It's good to remember the past, forgive, but never forget. But the past does not dictate the future. We have to keep looking forward, looking ahead, and understanding that things aren't going to happen immediately. We have to start the process somewhere, and we need this other thing to be there all along. That's called stability. We need to have stability as we transition into a brave new world. Not the book, but hey, if you like that book, Brave New World, sure. So, yeah, the information age continues. We're almost to, as some would call it, the golden age. But there's always new challenges. There's always new opportunities. We don't really know what's going to happen in 50 years. There could be any number of technological advances between now and then. We don't know how we're going to solve for different problems that arise, but we also don't know just how much we're going to develop in that time, how much we're going to have available to face these new changes. So I do have hope for the future. I don't think it's going to be so immediate. Things don't roll out that fast, but hey, if you're in the anti-obstructionist party and things are going in a generally good direction, hey, maybe things will speed up. I don't know. I just like to keep people on their toes. So let's see here. There's a couple more tweets for you. Actually, you know what? We'll do 2 more tweets for you today. How about that? Good deal, right? 2 more tweets. Talking of the anti-obstructionist party, and I do have a new video out, the anti-obstructionist party. Check it out on BitChute and YouTube. So here is actually 4 tweets. So I'll actually close out with this today. On U.S. politics, candidates vying for seats this autumn, because it was coming up to the 2018 U.S. midterm election. Candidates vying for seats this autumn, heed my words. Do not underestimate the desire of the American voter to get it done. Take a look at the 2016 presidential election voting by county for all 50 states, not just Los Angeles and New York City or California and New York. Check those voting by county for a quick read on their priorities. So almost the entire country voted for Trump by county. If you look at the map, it's something crazy. It's like 80, 85%. Check the numbers, do your research. But yeah, no, a large portion of the country. Now, only parts of the country that generally didn't vote red, by county were the city areas. There were a couple of other exceptions, but if you look at the entire area where Manhattan is, the boroughs of New York, if you look around California, SoCal, it's all it's all blue. All those big city areas, and that's where a lot of that popular vote difference came from too. About 3 or 4 million. If you had removed California and New York from the voting, Trump would have won the popular vote. But those high population areas, of course, they contribute to popular vote. So I say here, congressional obstruction by Republicans and Democrats on a rotating and conditional schedule is undeniably contributing to Congress's dismal approval rating. An anti-obstruction platform might be a strong option for a new voice looking to make a lasting impact. anti-obstruction. Then I say about electability. Say, dangers of prolonged echo chamber exposure include not seeing the larger paradigms at play. We're all human. We're all susceptible to filtering out pieces of a given complex issue that don't appear relevant to us. Prioritizing other sides may seem irrational. So analogies requiring high cognitive dissonance are less effective in the internet age. I'll say that one more time. Analogies requiring high cognitive dissonance are less effective in the internet age. Every side of an issue has wrong portions. That means the truth lies between the two sides, or more than two. Every side of an issue has wrong portions. Casting opposition as 100% irrational and disrespecting voters' intelligence in the process of calling them as well evil, casting your opposition as evil, it's just not as persuasive as it once was. So, yeah. Americans want to see things fixed. They don't want to live in this constant state of fighting each other. We don't want our enemy to be our fellow American. We have to direct our anger, we have to direct our, negativity at something. Now, I don't want to focus it on other countries or the people. I don't want it to be focused anywhere. But what I'm seeing, of course, is that a lot of Americans are tired of fighting their fellow American. They all want generally the same thing. They have the same goals. They just have different systems to get there. So that's where the anti-obstructionist party comes in. If you have a good idea, it's okay to let the Democrats win on that idea. Support an idea that's good for the country. Let it be bipartisan. Hey, I'm not saying just let any lobbyist or any corporate-controlled party like the Democrats or Republicans just run the show however they like. I'm saying that we have a system now where they don't want to let a good thing happen when the Republican is the president, or they don't want it to happen when the Democrat's the president. They want to wait. They want the good things to happen when their team is in power. Satire is only okay when their team's in power. But they want, so they hold things back. Americans want to get it done. Not get her done like Larry the Cable Guy, but get it done. And they voted for Trump. America voted for Trump. He won the Electoral College. And, people keep on saying, we want to get rid of the Electoral College, abolish it. And I say, we have 50 states. They all need representation. Okay? Just because you have more people living in a state like California isn't the whole country. Texas isn't the whole country. New York, Massachusetts, all these places, Nebraska, they're not the whole country. They have their priorities. They have their best interests. And so when you're trying to get one person, like a president, to govern an entire country of 50 states with just all these different views, all these different cultures, all these different people from across the world that have come here over the past 500 plus years. Then you have the Native Americans. And there's really hard to get everybody on the same page. So we have a system. We have our Constitution. We have Electoral College. And we don't just go by the popular vote, because you could much more easily manipulate the popular vote. And you wouldn't need to campaign in places. You'd have to come up with another system that gives the middle America, the less populated states, more of, a voice. You can't have the coasts. Resources are mined and so forth inland. You can't have the coasts that benefit from the resources that, they don't have, there isn't a farm in the middle of Central Park, right? They have to bring those resources in from other places, bring them to the city. So it's like the people that are, eating, consuming the resources, they shouldn't be making all the decisions for the people that have to, grow the resources, to build the resources, to create them so they can be consumed. No, they should have a voice too, right? They should have a voice too. So they have their priorities. They voted red for the red team. So congressional obstruction by Republicans and Democrats on a rotating and conditional schedule. So that's saying, of course, that, when President Obama was in office, the Republicans were obstructing. Now that President Trump is in office, the Democrats are obstructing. And of course, it's rotating, it's conditional. But it's also undeniably contributing to Congress's dismal approval rating. They have an approval rating that's somewhere around, I want to say, 10 to 12%. And, people just aren't happy with the obstruction, with them not getting things done, with not knowing the issues that well, with them being too old. There should be term limits for Congress. We have to get rid of Citizens United so that there isn't the corrupted form of campaign finance in this country. This tweet video today is just a rant. But, an anti-obstruction platform might be a strong option for a new voice looking to make a lasting impact. Both sides working together harmoniously to get things done. That's what it is. Now, you have to know what the right thing to do is first. You can't just go out there all willy-nilly. And again, you have to have a plan. You have to have a way. Now, I see that way as more capitalism than socialism, but I also, of course, separate social programs from socialism. There are some crossover, but I think that you can have a tax subsidized, or you can have other forms of soft socialism, social programs, without going the full, let's take it to centralized public health care and all these things. There is a great argument for single payer, but, I feel like, here's the thing about socialism. Generally speaking, don't go and pick it apart in the comments section below if I piss you off or if I trigger you by misconstruing something about socialism. I'm not saying socialism bad. I'm saying it has a time and a place. It can't be the foundational economic structure of your nation. It has to be supplemental. It has to be secondary on top of a capitalistic structure for things to work, with the free market driving things. But basically, socialism tends to come in this box where they want the whole system to revolve around it. You can't have half socialist, half capitalist. If they want to control the industry, if they want to control the workforce, if they want to control everything, and they want to take more taxes, it's hard for a capitalistic system to coexist in a largely socialistic system. It's almost I know this isn't a totalitarian joke, but it's almost an all or nothing thing when you get socialism. So I like to say, look, if you have a capitalistic system like the United States, you can also add a couple social programs here and there. And of course, you have what they call your roads and your public utilities, your public things that are paid for, that everybody generally supports, that is helping the economic picture of a town, a city, municipality, or a state, whatever it might be. So, anti-obstruction might be a good thing at this point in time because people want things to change. They want change. And you don't get there by blocking each other. So the electability question, dangers of the prolonged echo chamber exposure include not seeing the larger paradigms. So if you're, as I often say, if you're in this echo chamber, if you're living here, I think it's good to get away sometimes to vacation to an echo chamber, but if you live there, well, you start to become conditioned. And if it's a very unhealthy environment, it can be a form of soft psychosis, if you catch my drift. because you're not seeing reality. You're not seeing the wider picture. You're not getting all the information. You're only seeing things framed in that way that you understand. You're seeing it from this one window that, who's to say which parts of it are right, which are wrong? How skewed is it? Is everything being taken into consideration? So on and so forth. So this is something that's unavoidable, though. We are all human. We're all susceptible to filtering out pieces of a given complex issue that don't appear relevant to us. We have our confirmation bias. We have our life that we've lived, our experience. We know what we know, and there's nothing we can't cover every base because we're not another person that sees things differently. We see the things the way we do. We try hard to put it all together, to think outside the box and remember that other people could see it differently. But it can be easy to fall into a right think pattern. Everything outside of that echo chamber is wrong think. Everything outside of that narrow Overton window of acceptable dialogue is wrong think. Or they might throw a word at it like hate speech. It's hate speech. It's just an arbitrary term used to shut down your dialogue. So it could seem irrational to prioritize the other side. What if the other side... this is what I always tell people when they're talking to me about Republican and Democrat. I say, do you think that every single thing on the Democrat side is correct? Every single piece of rhetoric, every single point, every single position is the right one, always, every time? Do you think that every single position on the Republican side, the Republicans are always right, the GOP is always right, their positions are always correct, there's never any gray area? Then you're part of the problem. The truth lies between both sides. And it may seem irrational to think that, but it's the truth. One side doesn't have a monopoly on anti-fascism. I have to be in Antifa to be against fascism. No. You can't own being a good person. Well, we're the party that has just the good people on it. The moral people. The smart people. The ones that think forward. Yeah, we're the progressives. We're the ones, we have a monopoly on progress. I'm like, no, that's not how it works. You can't just own a word like that. Take it and that's it. So, finally, analogies requiring high cognitive dissonance are less effective in the internet age because you can check your sources, you can check things, you can fact check, you can go to Snopes, fact check Babylon Bee. Why would you want to do that? Babylon Bee is a satire site, and yet Snopes, perhaps also a satire site, who knows, fact checked them and said that they were trying to spread a fake, an onion-like, totally nonsense news, fake news site. Not like CNN or Fox News fake news, but actual fake news. Babylon Bee is a satire site. They were being fact-checked by Snopes. I'm like, okay. Clown world. Beep, beep. So, you can't really get away with this crazy stuff anymore. You'd need to have like almost universal cognitive dissonance for for some of these things to pass. But we have it. We have people that are seeing things on two different screens. 2 movies on one screen, as Scott Adams says it. The internet age, though, lets you check it. You can Google, you can DuckDuckGo. But again, I say every side of an issue has wrong portions. So, just because one side might have the preferable solution doesn't mean everything they say is correct. It might be better for politics to stay on one side or the other and just fortify that position and try to push that across. And oh, the Republicans or the Democrats, they got it right this time. But the reality is that there's obviously things on both sides that are good, and there are things on both sides that are bad. So, casting the opposition as 100% irrational is a fool's errand. And it disrespects voters' intelligence. Like, voters know better than to be boxed in. Well, you're this, so you have to vote this way. Or you have this opinion, so you have to vote that way. There can't be any nuance. You're either with us or against us. Like, that's identity politics. Splitting people up. You're either with us or you're against us. Do you support toxic masculinity? Do you support this? Do you support that? No, I support common sense. Is that still a thing? Is common sense still a thing? So it really isn't as persuasive. As evidenced by this video where I'm going on and on about it, it's not as persuasive as it once was. There's too much information out there for people to get hunkered down in one echo chamber or another, but we still do. We're only human. So, I don't know what to say. I just want people to keep an open mind. I don't want people to fight. I want people to be able to agree to disagree and not let it tear apart at the fabric of society. That's a small ask, right? So I'm going to give you one more tweet today, and we're going to go into that now. It is a beautiful Sunday. It's getting a little darker now, but it's a Sunday afternoon, the 25th of August, 2019. Weekend almost over, but we'll do one more tweet. So more about how, the truth lies between one side, both sides, all sides, every corner of the political sphere. This is a good tweet for that. Good ideas can have diminishing returns over time. If they advance enough in a given direction, they become bad ideas. The key to success involves knowing when to change direction or directions. Success depends on which goals are set. The past does not determine the future. So I'll break this down one line at a time. Yummy. Good ideas. Good ideas can have diminishing returns over time. So, have you ever had a good idea that overstayed its welcome? It happens. It can't just go in one direction forever. The inertia has to be countered eventually. You can't just keep on going more and have no effect. Inevitably, there has to be a little bit of a rubber band. Okay, there has to be something to stop the inertia, and usually, of course, every action has an equal and opposite reaction, so something on the other side will, of course, react to the change in direction. But good ideas, of course, can have diminishing returns, and if they advance enough in that direction, they can become bad ideas. There were things, and I'm going to speak very generally here, but this applies to so many situations. There are things that were once good, the more you had, the better. And then they got to a point, a threshold, a turning point, a fork in the road. Not even a fork. It's just the end of a gradual line upward. It starts a tip, a cycle. they become bad ideas. Things that were good ideas can become bad ideas. But the key to success, the key, is knowing when to change direction. How much is too much? When is it time to curb it back? Go in a different direction. You got to be pretty intelligent. You're going to have good intuition. You might even need to be a little bit prescient. But of course, the key to success involves knowing when to change. You can't just do the same thing again and again and again and expect it to always work. There always is this, we have this tendency to evolve, and it's true. And that success, of course, that key to success when you change directions, of course, depends on which goals are set. So, something that was bad before, maybe we didn't have the technology to take advantage of it. Maybe people simply did not understand it. Maybe the climate wasn't the way it needed to be. Maybe weather wasn't the way it needed to be. Maybe industry wasn't the way it needed to be. Maybe the politics, maybe the general understanding, the acceptance, the vitals of the society, maybe they weren't ready to go. Maybe just we didn't have other factors, outside factors from other countries, other parts of the world. This thing was bad, but maybe it's because it needed to be refined. And then when it was refined, it was ready for consumer use and acceptance into mainstream society. And then you have good things that can turn into bad things as well. It's all about knowing when to change direction. And of course, what I'm trying to say here is that there's pretty much a time, and it's all about the time. It's not about the idea being good or bad. It's about the time and the place, the context that makes an idea good or bad. Now, I don't want to give any destructive examples, but if you can imagine parallel universes, if you can imagine outside the box, and you can think of all these different possibilities, things that we have negative associations with, hell, maybe across the galaxy they have positive associations because their world is almost, in many ways, the reverse of ours. That's one thought experiment we could do. We could think. Who knows how somebody would react when they see the things that we have on our world? Because it's not the idea that's good or bad. Sometimes it's the time, the context. And of course, I say the past does not determine the future. It can give us some patterns, make us think we can tell what's going to happen in the future, but that can only get you so far because everything is unfolding in real time. So, yeah. Well, I've had fun here doing another tweet video. I missed you last week. I was off in Maine having some fun at a place called Loon Pond. Definitely check it out if you're in Maine. It's a nice place to go swimming, ride around a boat. Hell, there's a bunch of lakes in Maine. Go where you like. I actually went to Sebago Lake a couple of years ago. That was a lot of fun. But hey, the video's over. I'm trying to make it continue, but I think it's time to say goodbye. So as I always say, everything I said tonight might be wrong. Or everything I said tonight might be right. Or maybe some of it's right and some of it was wrong. I think that makes the most sense, right? So I thank you again for watching. If you enjoyed the content, please do hit the like and also give me a subscribe if you'd like. If you didn't like the content, hit the thumbs down button because I believe in meritocracy. If you really enjoyed the content, please do hit the notification bell. And I can, of course, be found, Real Jeff Tidwell, on Twitter. I'm also on Minds, Gab, Parler, Telegram, Instagram, and if you're not watching this on BitChute, you're watching it on YouTube. Please check me out on either of those services. And hey, leave me a comment below with your thoughts. I look forward to reading them. Everybody, have a great night.